What's up, guys? Metal571 here, and this is the Audeze LCD-2, and I'm going to be talking about it. Disclaimer, and I'm going to be doing a disclaimer right up front on every video from now on in case I wasn't already doing that. This is mine. I bought it used. In fact, this is the same headphone that Max Settings just reviewed. If you don't follow his channel already, you should. He has a really good ear for what good sound is. And mainly I'm going to be comparing it to the LCD-2 Classic, which I also own, 100% mine. Has nothing to do with any companies. No companies are involved in this video whatsoever, just in case you think that biases me. So I own both of these. And what is this? This is a $995 or $1,000 if you really want to round it up here. 106 millimeters, 70 ohm, 101 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity, planar magnetic, full size, open back headphone. And actually, it's the same driver as the LCD-2 Classic, which I've reviewed before. But this has phasers. What are phasers? They're essentially waveguides. If you put your finger inside the ear cup, you can actually feel the sharp edges of the magnets. So they're shaped magnets, which helps the sound to sound better. At least that's what Audeze says. The details you can find on Audeze's website. I'm not going to go into them in this video. But as a result of that, even though this is normally just called the LCD-2, a lot of people refer to it as the LCD-2 Phaser, just as in F-A-Z-O-R, just to distinguish it more clearly, because the LCD-2 Classic does not have phasers. And if you feel in here, all the magnets are flat instead of sharp inside the ear cup. So hopefully your ears don't touch the driver or the inside of here. They don't, for me at least, because these pads are massive, as you can see. But that's the main sound difference causing aspect of these two headphones that I'm aware of. They're also made out of slightly different materials, but this is a sound review, and if you want to talk more about the materials, you can find another review for that. I talk about the sound mainly, so let's get into the sound. Bass first, as always. So the 2F, this guy, measures flatter on my MiniDSP ears. The 2C actually has some gentle roll-off. I don't know if I even talked about that when I reviewed this against the LCD-X, but there's a very slight roll-off going down from 1K all the way down to like 10 hertz, and it's like a constant roll-off. Some of the other drivers Audeze's released don't have this problem. The 2C has that. The 2F has a little bit less of that, despite having the same diaphragm, basically. But despite that, for some reason, it sounds like the LCD-2 needs more boost. I found myself using 1 or 2 dB more bass boost on this guy than the 2 Classic to get the bass up to where I wanted it, which is pretty interesting because it further complicates things in that the bass dynamics between the two headphones didn't really sound significantly different to me, despite claims from many other people that the Classic tends to have more slam and has better timbre. I don't know. I didn't notice it. They both have pretty good dynamic impact in the bass, and at least in my opinion, maybe the 2 Phaser has slightly less, and that's why I needed more bass boost to make it sound like it had more bass. That's usually what ends up happening to me when I'm EQing something that doesn't have as much impact, but I certainly was not bothered by it. You might disagree. That's fine, but for me, I would not stop myself from buying one of these headphones just because of dynamic impact, because of course the bass extension on both of them is excellent. However, the 2 Phaser rolls off just slightly less as you go down to the bottom. It's not something I even really noticed between these headphones. I had to measure it in order to know. So it's slight. You'll see it on the graph in the description. So the mids, the 2F is slightly cleaner here. Now I have to admit that when I measured these headphones, you can clearly see in the measurements that actually my 2 Classic has a bit of a very narrow bump, right around 3K, 3.5K, something like that, or at least the equivalent of it. MiniDSP ears, I'm going to have to make a video on how to read the measurements from that thing, because it is weird. But anyway, the upper mids of the 2C are a little bit more forward, actually, than the 2 Phaser. But if you try to correct it with EQ, it's more difficult, and that's kind of a telltale sign that there's extra grain. There's not as much cleanliness. It's a little grittier. It's less smooth on the 2 Classic, just a little bit. And they're close enough that where I admit that I could be being fooled by the FR in this case, just because of the way my 2 Classic is slightly forward compared to the Phaser. Neither of them really have a forward upper mid-range. I mean, it's nothing like the Sennheisers. For those who don't know, the 6XX is my reference headphone. However, I EQ the mids down by about, I think, 3 dB, the upper mids, and I extend the bass out to 20 hertz with some EQ. So that's like my reference sound. I probably should make a video on that at some point, because I had some comments lately saying that they have no idea what I'm talking about because I don't talk about compared to whatever my reference sound is. So it'll happen eventually, guys. But anyway, those who've been following me for a while know that, though. The upper mids on this are definitely much, much more recessed than the 6XX, where the 6XX without EQ I find slightly forward, maybe by about 3 or 4 dB, depending on the genre. This is quite a bit behind, and I actually think I applied, the EQ's in the description, I think it was 4 decibels to the upper mids. This really needed a lot of boost to get back to like normal level upper mid range. So it's not something I would really use with EQ. I mean, without EQ, definitely not. And, oh yeah, something else I left out of the notes is both of these have that hump at like 1K or 500 hertz, somewhere between those two frequencies that is kind of annoying and a little woody sounding and shouty in a more of a mid-mids and low-mids kind of a way. I find that distracting, so I pull that down by maybe, I think it's like 2 or 3 dB there, and I boost the upper mids at the same time. And that restores the mid-range neutrality to some decent degree. But without it, they'd sound odd. And this tuning, despite me being seen as the ultimate Audeze fanboy, I don't really use these headphones without EQ at all. And in fact, I wouldn't even recommend using them without EQ. And I think Max Settings totally agrees with that. He doesn't EQ at all, actually, which is fine, and lots of reviewers don't. Because there are headphones out there that don't need EQ. I'm just really picky, and I want to get, headphones that have the capability to sound good with EQ. I want to get the word out about them. So that's what Audezes are all about here. Anyway, moving on to the treble from the mids. The treble is probably the biggest difference between these two headphones. They do sound fairly similar. I was surprised people are really on one side of the camp or the other between the Classic and the Phaser. But for me, the difference between these two is fairly subtle in a number of ways, as long as, I guess, your two units don't differ too much, because there is still a little bit of variation between Audeze LCDs from unit to unit. But anyway, the treble here is more even and it's less peaky than the Classic, and it's not something that you're probably going to find in my measurements. It's something that if you listen to a lot of different genres of music, and especially it's clear on electronic music, that there's glare, like minor glare peaks in the treble. That probably means nothing to normal people, but basically there's less peakiness at specific small frequency ranges on the Phaser model than the Classic, and so as a result it also resolves better, but not necessarily because of the frequency response, because if you look at it in my MiniDSP ears, it's almost the same graph in the treble. They're very close, but you can hear that the Phaser will resolve small details, especially I found one in the mid treble around 10K. There's definitely a bit of a glare that if you try to EQ it around, you can still kind of hear that it's really warm, but it's also annoying on some songs and not others. So the 2 Classic is I think most of the money you're paying for the Phaser over this is definitely going to the treble quality, and it's less peaky, just like the mids. Really, there's less of that weird narrow 3K something peak, 4K peak that I have on my 2 Classic. In the Phaser, that's gone. It's just smooth. Both are very warm headphones, although I honestly don't think the 2 Phaser is as warm as people think it is. It's really just that the mids are very recessed, like very recessed. And the treble actually comes back to target, but you have to give it some time, because it doesn't really get there for like a Harman target all the way until around 10K. And you can hear that there's still some mid treble left there, but the mids are wrecked. I mean, without EQ, the mids they're just wrecked. They're just not there. And so that's why you have to adjust it with EQ. So if you're not willing to do that, you probably are going to find these pretty strange soundings. They do sound a little bit weird out of the box, maybe more than a little bit weird. So that's my impressions on the FR. So let's talk about the soundstage. There's been a lot of claims that adding phasers have destroyed the soundstage, and Audeze are very narrow. And I still didn't find that to be the case. I compared these back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, of course, as any reviewer should do. And I think I might have noticed that the 2 phaser is slightly more specific imaging. Like I tested Letters by Yoshi Horikawa, of course, that's, everybody knows that guy. And the width was really not that different. I don't know. The claims that the 2 Classic blows away the new phasered models and whatever in detail and dynamic slam and soundstage. I do not hear that. I'm not hearing that. So that was interesting because I definitely expected the phaser model based on, people online claiming that it's worse in timbre and worse in soundstage and worse in slam, and all this stuff just didn't correlate to the real world here, comparing these 2 back to back. It's not like everybody gets a chance to hold up both of these headphones and go and play them back to back to back to back. You have to be like at a meet to be able to do that. So I'm in a unique position where I can actually try that, and yeah, they're really a lot closer than I thought they were. Now, deal breakers, so other stuff that's not sound. Of course, the weight is going to be a problem for some people. These are not light headphones. I don't know exactly how much they weigh. They're not as heavy as an LCD-4, but they are quite hefty. However, with the new headband, this one you can see is a 2018 or later model because it's got the same headband that the LCD-2 Classic has, this suspension strap. Now, as you can kind of already see, this does stretch out and eventually starts, rubbing up against the top metal band here, and some people will probably find that annoying. I don't know, it does happen to me, but for some reason it doesn't really annoy me that much. So that is what it is. But over the previous design, where there's a bunch of just lightly padded bumps across the top and no suspension headband, it was much less comfortable than these. Pads are still as plush as ever. I mean, look at that, it's awesome. And yeah, so if you're not bothered by the weight, these will work great. But if you are bothered by the weight, you should take some solace, is that even the right word, to all the padding that they give you in the suspension headband to try to distribute that weight well. And that's why it doesn't bother me very much, but you might completely disagree, that's fine. And also, I want to say that this review is only accurate, at least to my standards, for the 2016 revision and later LCD-2. So those who are really into Audeze stuff know that there was a revision to the drivers in 2016. Audeze confirmed this on HeadFi personally, and after that they really improved the detail a lot. I think I reviewed an LCD-3, you'll be able to find it if you look at my channel, an early phaser, and it was bad. Like, I was really surprised at how bad that thing sounded in terms of like detail. It was really grainy, and I don't know, and it didn't even slam very hard and all kinds of stuff. So whatever they did in 2016, everything I've listened to that Audeze's made, no, okay, not everything, there are exceptions, but all the popular models like the 2 and the X and the 4 and the 3, I can say in particular, that I've heard and reviewed at home here, have been really good after the 2016 revision. In 2018, they started adding the suspension headband. So they're really listening to people's gripes about the problems with their headphones, and they seem to be getting better. Although frequency response without EQ is, that's up to interpretation, of course. So what is my conclusion? This is the headphone I'm keeping. I'm keeping the phaser. I'm going to sell the 2 Classic. It's not for public sale. It's already pre-sold to one of my friends. Unfortunately for you guys, but so and it's just a slightly more resolving, slightly smoother FR sound signature, and I wouldn't buy either one of these headphones new. I think that $799 and $995 are sort of now maybe very inflated pricing for some of the sound quality aspects of this, considering the 6XX is like $220. That really broke the market, I think. In terms of value is very hard, and I've talked about this on various posts on the internet. Value is like so hard to judge in headphones, but I think if you can get these guys used, under $650, which is what I did, wow, that's a great value. And considering that the bass extension, if you are an EDM head and you're handy with EQ, this is your headphone. This is one of the best options. This or the classic. They're both really good for that kind of thing. And metal, I would say, if you EQ them again. Those are the two genres I test a lot of, but I do test everything else as well. So that's why I like these so much, and that's why I own the Fazor now, and I'm selling the classic. The Fazor is slightly upgraded. I wouldn't buy either one new because, yeah, that's a lot of money. And so something else I wanted to talk about was the age-old HD800 versus LCD-2 debate. Where's my HD800? I think that's it, sitting back there. And those two are really nothing alike at all. Anyone who claims that they're similar at all is just not correct. And I don't think anyone has, but I'm just saying the HD800 definitely bests the Audeze in terms of ultimate detail retrieval in the treble especially, and soundstage, regardless of the tuning, because the tuning's way different. However, I think the bass detail and the near zero harmonic distortion of the Audezes really beats the HD800 like a lot in the bass region. So those are quite good for complementary headphones that don't sound anything alike. They get compared a lot. The HD800 is a bright detail monster with huge 6K peak and not as much bass capability as these. It's really good bass capability for a dynamic, but I think the planar bass is awesome here. So that is the LCD-2. And stay tuned, because if you guys haven't already noticed by now, oh wow, I can't even point at the right place. These guys are the ZMF Aeolus, and the Auteur are right there on top of that printer, and they're coming next. And so I thought I would compare the LCD-2 to the LCD-2 Classic when reviewing the LCD-2, but when I review the Aeolus, I want to put it up against the LCD-2 Fazor, because that seems like an interesting comparison that people are going to want to hear about. So that's the LCD-2. Hope that helps you make a decision whether you should buy it or not. And I'll see you in the next review.